Hey guys, welcome to the channel. My name's Olivia. Over the last 3 years, I've traveled full-time in my RV with my husband and 2 rescue dogs as I worked as a travel nurse. I got into traveling in 2020 when the world was a little bit nuts, so I had to learn as I went. So in this series, I'm going to be walking you through some tips and tricks and things that I wish I knew when I got started. For this very first intro episode, we're going to be talking about what is a travel nurse to begin with. So first things first, what is a travel nurse anyway? It's a temporary, non-permanent contracted position in some kind of healthcare facility. And facility can mean a lot of different things. From my personal experience, I did work at hospitals, but it can also be an infusion center, a clinic, things like that. As a travel nurse, you're technically employed by the recruiting agency that you're working with instead of the hospital or facility that you're working at. So whether that's your responsibility or the facility that you're physically working at's responsibility, either you or that facility will be reporting your hours worked to the agency that you technically work for. And the agency is who is going to be paying you. And usually that's weekly. Why are temporary nurses or travel nurses hired to begin with? You are filling a temporary need. So if you think back to COVID, in the prime time of the pandemic, there were a lot of influx of patients coming in, and we needed more healthcare workers to fill that need for care. Another example would be if a lot of nurses on that specific floor are out on maternity leave, or some have just recently retired and the hospital hasn't filled their permanent positions yet. Another really good example that happens all over the country in different areas would be an influx of population through a specific time of the year. So I like to describe it with using the example of Florida. You'll get a lot of people from northern states that come down to Florida for snowbirding to avoid the snow in the winter months. So at that time of year, there can be more patients in the hospital getting sick than what they're used to with the population at that area, so they will sometimes contract temporary employees to help fill that need. As a travel nurse, your role and your responsibility is similar to the staff nurse that works there permanently. So if I related to my time traveling and I worked in hospital settings, I still had the same amount of patients. I was still expected to pass meds and do daily cares and things like that. So it's really just specifically about not living in that area permanently, and the pay is different. But we'll talk about that in a future video. Contract length varies for travel nurses. I've seen anything from as short as a week in the pandemic to a couple months. Typically what I saw was 13 weeks, so about 3 months at one time. You can extend as a contracted nurse at that facility if the facility still has needs for contracted employees, if you like the facility too, but you don't have to. Usually towards the end of your contract, if there's still needs and you did a good job, the nurse manager will get in contact with your recruiter or with you specifically on a face-to-face or email basis to ask you about extending if you want to. You can usually extend up until a year at one specific location before things get a little bit tricky with the IRS, but we'll talk about that in a future video. So that is a very, very brief and general overview of travel nursing as a whole. Thanks for watching. I hope that helps. If you have any questions, feel free to comment them below and make sure to subscribe, as I'm going to dive in deeper with other videos talking about what to expect as a travel nurse, whether that's interviewing, the no-nos of starting a travel nurse contract, how to review your contract, and so much more. Goodbye!